The year is 1939. It's the dead of night in Pingfang, a district of the Harbin Prefecture in Japanese Imperial-occupied China. A squadron of over 100 Chinese rebels led by Lieutenant Wang Wei, clutching Bergmann MP-18 machine guns, hurry through the streets towards their destination, the bioweapons lab operated by Unit 731, and monstrous, terrifying Japanese Surgeon General Shiro Ishii. It is a mission of liberation and revenge. If you know anything about Unit 731, just hearing the name will send a chill down your spine, just as it did for the Chinese soldiers hoping to perform a surprise assault on the unit's complex of horrors. Rumors had spread from the Chinese prisoners of war taken there, and the knowledge of the horrible things happening to their countrymen inside that building made their blood boil with white-hot fury. Their mission was simple. They would launch an attack on the complex when the unit least expected it, save as many prisoners as they could, while also taking revenge on as many unit soldiers as they could get their hands on. But what the brave soldiers didn't know is that they were in for a battle they couldn't hope to win, because what they were fighting was not in any traditional sense human. They were about to go toe-to-toe with SCP-4007, an elite group of anomalous Japanese super soldiers known as the Pingfang 5, a name spoken in fear by their enemies and victims for what little time both remained alive. The Chinese rebels were hiding in a stand of trees outside the fortress, waiting for the right moment to strike, when the Pingfang 5 suddenly beat them to the punch and descended upon them. The plan was thrown into chaos when the trees burst into flames without so much as a hint of artillery being fired. The soldiers, all hardened men of war, began to grow scared. But then they saw something even more terrifying standing there amongst the flames. First Lieutenant Mitsuo Kitano, also known as Lightning Bolt, or SCP-4007-1 to the Foundation. One of his hands was wreathed in blue sparks of electricity, and the others he wielded a Type 14 Nambu pistol. Lieutenant Kitano continued his attack, using his anomalous lightning to blow away soldier after soldier. When the shocked rebels tried to return fire, they found that they couldn't land a single shot. Kitano dodged every bullet. The second wave of the assault came from behind, as the rebels tried to flee Kitano's wrath. Private Takashi Honda, also known as the Ogre, or SCP-4007-2, charged into the fray. He effortlessly wielded a Type 11 machine gun and rained bullets down upon his unsuspecting foes. They shot back at him, but the bullets seemed to just bounce off his skin. He wasn't bothered by them in the slightest. He just smiled and continued firing. The rebels quickly realized that the whole thing had been a trap, but what had given them away? As if on cue, one of their own soldiers turned and began firing on his fellow soldiers with his MP-18. This man wasn't a rebel. In fact, he wasn't even Chinese. It was Corporal Joichiro Aida, also known as the Fox, or SCP-4007-3. How could he have possibly infiltrated the squadron? The answer is simple. He's an anomalously brilliant liar. In fact, it's impossible to not believe a single thing that Corporal Aida says, making him a true expert in espionage. Not a single one of the other rebels ever had a chance of sniffing him out before the doomed mission. If this betrayal surprised them, then what came next must have seemed like something out of a nightmare. Lieutenant Wang Wei, the man who'd spearheaded the entire mission, turned and began picking off his own troops with his pistol. The surviving soldiers didn't understand. Had the lieutenant gone mad? They tried to shoot him, but just like the others, he dodged effortlessly and continued to murder them. That's because he wasn't Lieutenant Wang Wei at all. Wei had been murdered in the forest earlier that night, and replaced by Private Teruo Nishimura, also known as SCP-4007-5, or the Shapeshifter. The Pingfang 5 had infiltrated and compromised the mission from before it had even begun. They'd never even stood a chance. During the chaos of the massacre, a few of the rebels had managed to escape, running through a nearby clearing into a thicket of trees. If they could survive, then perhaps they could regroup and lead a second assault on another day. They had no hope of survival during a head-on conflict with these anomalous super soldiers. They needed to get away and form a new strategy. But gunshots started ringing out through the forest, tearing into their bodies and dropping the men one by one. They tried to return fire, but they couldn't even see who was shooting at them. It seemed to come from all directions. The rebels' dying thoughts were that the trees around them must have been crawling with Japanese troops. The reality was even more frightening. It was only one man, Private Shigeru Matsui, codenamed Smoke, for this ability to become invisible at will. To the Foundation, he's known as SCP-4007-4, the last member of the Ping Fang 5, the deadliest troops in the entire Imperial Japanese Army. But unlike many of the biological anomalies cataloged by the SCP Foundation, the Ping Fang 5 were not born, they were made. In case you aren't familiar with the infamous Unit 731 and their horrifying complex in Ping Fang, this unit was the secret department of the Japanese army ordered into existence by Emperor Hirohito himself for one sinister purpose: researching chemical and biological weapons for the Japanese Imperial Army. Their leader, the Surgeon General Shiroishi, was essentially given blanket permission to do whatever he deemed necessary in order to achieve results for his emperor and his nation. Ishii took that directive and ran with it, unleashing pseudoscientific evil on a level matched only by the Nazi extermination camps in Europe. Experimental weapons and horrific diseases were tested on captured Chinese civilians, political dissidents, and prisoners of war. Thousands of people met horrific ends through execution, experimentation, and vivisection, which is the dissection of a subject that is still very much alive. How does this relate to the Ping Fang 5 and SCP-4007? It all comes back to a top-secret project, overseen by Ishii himself, Project Shinka. While Unit 731 was established in 1935, in 1937 they began working in collaboration with the Imperial Japanese Anomalous Matters Examination Agency. Think of it as Imperial Japan's hyper-nationalist answer to the SCP Foundation. They had become aware of the existence of anomalous individuals in Imperial-controlled territories, and General Ishii wanted to know whether the powers manifested in these anomalous individuals could be induced in others through forced organ removal and transplantation. To test this hypothesis, Ishii had the Japanese secret police round up anomalous individuals in Imperial territory en masse. They were subjected to mass vivisections, with the intention of isolating and removing anomalous organs. It was an act so positively genocidal in proportion that East Asia had statistically fewer anomalous humans than they should to this day. Ishii's intention was to transplant the organs into loyal volunteers from the Japanese military in order to create an unbeatable military force, perfect soldiers who would win the war for them. The vast majority of these twisted experiments were complete failures, leading to the higher-ups at Unit 731 almost writing Project Shinka off as a waste of time and canceling the whole thing. But there were soon 5 notable exceptions, the very scary individuals you've already met. Not only did every member of the Ping Fang 5 end up with a specific anomalous superpower as a result of the experiments, they also experienced incredible anomalous prowess across the board. Members of the 5 boast extended longevity, meaning they rarely show their age. Enhanced physical abilities, including faster reflexes, incredible senses, and immense physical strength. They also appear to have advanced mental development, displaying phenomenal tactical and strategic reasoning, as well as the ability to effortlessly learn, read, and speak multiple languages, like Japanese, English, Mandarin Chinese, Russian, and German. Of course, Japan eventually lost the war, but the Ping Fang 5 had no intentions of ending their fight. They continued their missions long after Japan formally surrendered, causing chaos and violence across East Asia. After several unsuccessful engagements with isolated members of the Ping Fang 5, leading to the deaths of many Foundation agents and civilians, the Foundation formed Mobile Task Force 551, aka MacArthur's Dogs, an elite group of operatives trained for the specific mission of bringing down the Ping Fang 5. While the hunt rages on, 3 of the 5 are already dead. SCP-4007-1, Mitsuo Kitano, the man who can unleash bursts of electricity, met his end in Burma in 1948. During a procedure called Operation Smokehouse, 551 engaged Kitano in combat in the jungle. As was one of his trademark techniques, he attempted to use his electricity powers to burn down the jungle and escape during the chaos. However, the Foundation operatives surrounded and boxed him in. He couldn't escape, and when the fires were put out, he was found dead on the ground. The apparent cause of death was smoke inhalation. SCP-4007-2, Takashi Honda, the man with bulletproof skin, died in 1957 in the Philippines. 551 engaged him in combat in a mission dubbed Operation Homewrecker, which culminated in them calling down an airstrike on him. In the aftermath, Honda was found dead, but his cause of death was determined as having been from a powerful electric shock. And finally, SCP-4007-3, Joichiro Aida, the man with the silver tongue, was found dead a year later in 1958. His corpse was discovered in his room in Guiyang, southern China. He appeared to have been strangled to death, and interestingly, there was evidence that he tried to engage in a shootout with his killer, but hadn't succeeded in preventing his own murder. All of these circumstances were somewhat mysterious, but the Foundation didn't investigate them much further after the bodies were tagged and bagged. SCP-4007-5, Teru Nishimura, the Shapeshifter, is still on the run today, while SCP-4007-4 Shigeru Matsui, the Invisible Man, is doing just the opposite. He lives in Sarawak, Malaysia, and works in open cooperation with the SCP Foundation to help track down the fifth member of the Ping Fang 5. Not much has changed in the 64 years since the death of Joichiro Aida. It seemed like the search for SCP-4007-4 had gone cold, until a Foundation archival clerk found something suspicious: the original paper copy of the SCP-4007 document, which was dated a year before the Foundation had supposedly discovered the existence of SCP-4007. As the archival worker dug further, they found a number of unsettling discoveries that alter the true meaning of SCP-4007. In the original paper documents, each dead member of the Ping Fang 5 had organs missing, and each subsequent member's death involved a power possessed by a former member. 2 was electrocuted, and 3's gun was useless, as the killer had been wearing 2's bulletproof skin. Who was behind this? Why? And most importantly of all, how had this all been forgotten? Through more digging, the Foundation discovered the truth about SCP-4007-4. His powers weren't invisibility, they were anti-mimetic. He can make people forget him at will, essentially editing their memories so he could do whatever he wanted without detection. Like, for example, murdering his team members and stealing their powers. They even managed to find an archived letter from 4 to 3, begging for his help in fighting some kind of unknown monster, something that would require their combined powers to face, whether they ended up being as 5 separate men or one man with all of their powers. This whole time, SCP-4007-4 had been playing the Foundation like a fiddle, using their resources to help him track down the final member of the Ping Fang 5, to recruit him into one final mission, or murder him and steal his powers. But that still leaves one question: what is this mission? What is this monster? The Foundation managed to find out, at least partially. They charted the death locations of each of the 3 dead Ping Fang members and the living location of SCP-4007-4 and discovered something amazing. 4 of the 5 points on a perfect pentagon, centering on the South China Sea. The Foundation also estimated that the Pentagon would reveal the location of SCP-4007-5 at the final point, but his location isn't nearly as interesting as what resides at the center of this massive geographical pentagon. Foundation divers discovered huge numbers of sunken Japanese battleships, downed planes, and thousands of bones littering the seabed. Based on the damages to these vessels, it was clear that they hadn't been shot or blown up. No. They had been torn apart by something obscenely huge and powerful underneath the water. The Pentagon, a significant shape in sorcery, is likely a massive supernatural containment ritual, keeping whatever unspeakable horror is lurking under the ground there from escaping. A containment ritual that could only be maintained by 5 special individuals in 5 special places. It was in this moment that the Foundation came upon a truly horrifying revelation. They had misjudged the intentions of Project Shinka. It was never about creating assets for the war against the Allies. It was about a war against something else entirely. Something much more dangerous than, and deadly than, the squabbles between men. It was about the entity that lurked below. A creature that nobody understood, and that no conventional weapon can fight. And if the ritual is ever broken and the beast is allowed to rise, the Pingfang 5 will be the very least of our problems. Now check out SCP-001 The Broken God Ouroboros Cycle and SCP-5545 Mysterious Tunnels in Antarctica Abnormality for more fascinating mysteries and rabbit holes from the SCP Foundation.